as Mark said, any kind of cabbage is suitable to make sauerkraut. We're going to make traditional sauerkraut. So that means no vinegar, no canning, no heat processing. We're going to be relying on the natural bacteria that exists on the surface and that is within every raw, fresh vegetable. So we're essentially harvesting the good bacteria, and then we're going to be massaging the vegetables with salt to make a nice brine. So what the salt does is it draws the moisture out of the plant material and it slows the decay down. Salt also kills any unwanted pathogens and brings out all the nice enzymes that are in the vegetables. And that's how we make naturally fermented or cultured veggies or sauerkraut.
And do you want to talk a little bit about the vitamin C that's saved in cabbages? And that was actually one of the things that saved sailors coming across the ocean, was that they had fermented cabbage as part of their crew
Yeah,
food.
exactly. It prevented scurvy.
Hmm.
So when you ferment vegetables, when you ferment a lot of different foods, and that includes dairy, what happens is some unwanted microorganisms or bacteria are eliminated. And then what happens is the process of fermentation or culturing foods permits the vitamins and many minerals and enzymes to actually become more bioavailable.
Almost pre-digested.
Exactly. So fermentation is, in actuality, the pre-digesting your food, and that goes with fermented cheese, which gives us yogurt and kefir and cheese, and that also goes with a lot of meats and fish that's fermented.
Even sourdough bread, it's almost like pre-digesting some of the glutens. And I work in a wood-fired bakery, and one of the comments that we get from people is that sourdoughs actually help people that have gluten sensitivities. I wouldn't say you could be celiac, but you could actually eat a lot more sourdough product if you were able to research that it was a slow ferment, a real sourdough bread, because it's breaking down some of those glutens. So
Yeah, so the bacteria that are then released and proliferate in the process of culturing food actually inhibits what's called the anti-nutrients. So some seeds, especially, or grains, have what are called phytic acids, and the process of fermentation renders them invalid, we could say, or no longer, or they're not harmful anymore. And that's again why the process of fermentation actually releases nutrients. And I'll also say that a lot of the foods today in our modern world that we consider specialty or more fancy or even more expensive used to be the poor people's food.
yes.
So sauerkraut, pickles, naturally leavened breads, cured meats, cured cheeses, that was actually developed because we didn't have refrigeration. So now what was once the poor person's food that they relied on this process because of the lack of refrigeration and storage, we now have as these fancy specialty foods.
Pay top dollar for some good natural fermented pickles in the
Yeah,
deli.
exactly.
And we showed you previously how to make those pickles, so hopefully that's fermenting for you. And you're on your way to learning about sauerkraut with cabbages.
So it's recommended that you don't want to wash or soak your vegetables. You can dust them off, you can wash them, and then set them aside to air dry or pat them dry with a nice clean towel. Make sure your hands are washed, and if you have any cuts in your hands, you might want to consider wearing gloves. We've washed our hands, and neither of us have any cuts on our hands, not only because the salt will sting that wound, but you don't want to be exchanging any unwanted bacteria on your hands to the vegetable. That said, I will say that there has been a lot of research done on how the process of fermentation, if there were any, let's say, unwanted microorganisms or pathogens on our hands, they actually kill the pathogens. There's been some really interesting studies on many diseases and pathogens, but one that stands out to me is I think it was 2009, or when the avian flu was going around, they actually, in Korea, they fed chickens sauerkraut, and they found that it actually acted like an antibiotic. So there's lots of health benefits. You can research and learn about the benefits of naturally fermented foods and our immune system. And that's partly because the backbone of our immune system is our digestive system. We have over 5 pounds of bacteria in our gut. And when we're eating good, naturally cultured food, we're in a sense repopulating and feeding
Mm,
our digestion and hence our immune system. So we have some good organic cabbage, and then what
grown right here on the
grown
farm.
right here on the farm. And should do you want to do green and I'll do red, or what do you think?
Yeah, we'll start on the green.
Let's start on the
While
green.
while
Okay.
Seraphina is peeling down, I just want to express how often I've used an organic cabbage leaf and a bowl of water and washing those leaves and then adding a bit of flour. And that actually really has a lot of the yeasts that are needed for starting a sourdough culture. In a very quick situation, cabbage leaves or some of the vegetable leaves in your environment actually have a lot of the molds and mildews and yeasts on there that you want to start your ferment. So it's a quick way to get a ferment going for sourdough bread is from rubbing cabbage leaves.
That's really neat. I didn't know that. That's
Used it many,
great.
many times.
Yeah.
And the pigs are going to love me tomorrow because I've got
Yeah.
a lot of pig treats here.
Mhm.
All right. Do you want to start explaining some of the equipment that we have?
Yeah, so what we have is a crock, but you can be using, yeah, Mark has a lovely little crock here with a beautiful lid. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I have a crock, a large one here from my grandparents. If you don't have a crock, you don't need to go out and spend money on one. You could just use wide mouth canning jars.
Mhm.
People have used buckets. I mean, really, you can be using anything. There's now fancy ones that you can be buying, but we both have hand-me-downs. And then if you don't have a lid, like mine doesn't have a lid, what you want is a plate that can fit within so that you're creating a bit of a surface barrier. And then a stone or a heavy jar or some kind of weight to hold that plate down. Because remember, the process of fermentation is an anaerobic environment.
Mhm.
So you want to make sure that your vegetables beneath the natural brine that you're going to see us create. And then what I do, because I don't have a lid, is I just put a nice cloth, cotton cloth, and then once again another plate on top. So you can create your own makeshift lid.
And this again comes back to that explanation we had previously with the sour pickles, where a plastic sack with a Ziploc could be filled with a brine solution and placed on top of that crock as well. That would keep the cabbage immersed, and you're creating that anaerobic environment again. We also have something that was a gift from a very good friend who lived out in the prairies of Canada, and it's a mandolin, but in a very large scale. So when you can see this in action, it has three blades, metal blades, and it has a wooden tray that slides in a track. So you can quarter a cabbage and then put it in the track with this sleigh, and it actually slices it perfectly thin and sauerkraut wise. And do you want to explain about your pounder?
So a lot of my grapevines I have found at thrift stores, and this is a beautiful mallet. This is solid wood down here, and this acts as my sauerkraut pounder. So what we do is when we finally chop the kraut into nice shredded pieces, we put it all in our crock or first in a mixing bowl, add salt, and then you put it in here and you begin to just pound, 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 because what you're wanting to do is soften the plant material and allow that exchange. The salt will dehydrate the plant and naturally pull out the juices. And it's the natural juices in the cabbage that create the brine. And so you can massage the vegetable or you can use a handy pounder. There might be other gadgets out there, but I've just used my hands and then the pounder.
Yeah, I've used my neck folder before. Like they fit really well into a crock. Actually, massage salt bowl. Um, this actually is an instrument that came from an Indian grocery store in Vancouver, and it's used for something in Indian food. I'm not sure what, but when I got to the counter, it was quite a conversation. So as you can see, with large amount of cabbage, if you're doing say an oak barrel full of sauerkraut, which I've actually seen from a neighbor of mine when I grew up as a kid, um, then within minutes you have perfectly shredded cabbage that is ready for salting and then massaging, and even these beautiful little strange shapes that end up in it gives it a real personal touch. I think that's me. So I love to see and leave some of those core pieces in there. Okay, I'm going to continue chopping and grating, and we'll be ready for a huge massage session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should drink always some.
The machine.
Yeah.
The sauerkraut machine. Yeah. It has a very crunchy feel for dough, but I'm really liking the kneading aspect of this. I'm rethinking getting some of the previous batch there is getting nice and translucent. Yeah, the newer stuff is still
Yeah, you want it
taking
nice and tender. That's looking pretty good. What do you think? How's it feel?
amazing. And I don't know if the camera can catch all this liquid.
Yeah. Okay, time for you to taste, and I'm gonna taste. Let's see it for saltiness.
Yep. Such a fun part. Right. Yep.
I'm gonna rinse that off. I don't want to be rinsing that beautiful dusting that gives that translucent color, just like we see on grapes. It's like a cast, a white cast. You can see it on freshly picked apples as well. You want to save those or harvest those. Now, naturally, if there's any soil or bugs, cut those away. But I would be leaving this lovely dust.
Preserve it. It's like that's I guess a lot of commercial sauerkraut has vinegar in it.
Yeah, it does.
With like a vinegar well, even people that, like we were talking about your bread the other day. There's people that assume that you can fool the public by putting vinegar in dough to get a sourdough flavor.
Makes my grandmother angry. Look at that. Oh my God, that's so beautiful.
And it comes from a seed smaller than peppercorn.
Oh, so beautiful.
You can see it so much more in the picture.
Yeah.
Cabbage has. All of these plants came from a Mediterranean brassica. I can't remember the name of the original brassica, but kohlrabi, broccoli. Yeah, all of these brassica family, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower plants all came from one Mediterranean plant, which was bred and selected for bulbing and for color and for the florets, and all of it all came from one brassica family member in the Mediterranean.
I did not know that. That is really
And
cool.
then you have lately let that slip out of my mind what the name of that particular plant is, but it's in the Latin realm of brassica or crucifer. And crucifer actually comes from all the petals of these family have 4 petals representing the cross. So in Latin, crucifer and crucifix.
The cruciferous family.
Yes,
Yeah.
to the 4-petaled flower, part of the pollination factor. So it's a work of art.
It is.
Just looking into the interior. It's going to be yummy come September, October, and November, when a winter borscht is on its way, and you can put some of this incredible sauerkraut into the borscht, the way I was taught by some of the duper up in the Okanagan area. British Columbia, they definitely have a select amount of sauerkraut that they save just for the winter borscht. And these purple ones are well on their way with the beet borscht to adding to the color of that finished borscht. All right. I think
Beautiful.
we have enough in this bowl.
Okay, so that is about 246. I'm going to start with 2.5 tablespoons.
I'm going to let you start giving that the living.
Okay. Although my hands are not as skilled as yours, but I'll do my best.
Thousands of loaves later.
Yeah, exactly. So the cruciferous family involves or includes the turnip, kale, broccoli, cauliflower, kohlrabi.
Kales and collards.
Yeah, collards. So it's a vast family, and where we live in southwestern Canada, it's a great climate. And we can grow them year round. That's definitely my vegetable, kale especially. And one of my favorite, I'm actually going to get you to jump in here because you're way better at this. My favorite kraut is growing all the cruciferous that you can smell the sulfur, right? Yeah.
Definitely. Who's that?
It's an outer leaf.
Ah, getting some of that good bacteria that we spoke about earlier. Starting to see some moisture on the surface. I'm thinking we need to test this for saltiness
Yeah.
because I think a little bit more salt will
Let's
bring out
see.
more juice.
Let's see. Yeah, you're right. Maybe one more.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
Oh, look at this. Looking great.
beautiful. So each average medium-sized head of cabbage is approximately 2 pounds, and I'd say we have about 5 or 6 pounds in here. Um, so it is recommended that you, if you have a scale handy at home, that you weigh out your cabbage or weigh it at the grocery store. And
Easy if you have a bathroom scale. You just hold that loving cabbage in your arms and
That's
look down.
yeah, exactly. That's great. And then there's different calculations of how much salt to add to the cabbage. What I like to do is we have 6 pounds of cabbage. I would take 3 tablespoons, measured tablespoons of salt. And then from there you taste. And that is really just you kind of get a knack for how much salt you like. Yeah, so why don't you add 3, and then what we're going to do is we'll massage it with our hands, or if you don't like that idea, you can use your mallet. And then what happens is it's quite a fun process. I teach this in my herbal classes, and the students always love to see all that juice begins to be drawn out. You don't need to add water. There are some recipes out there that I've seen where people do add a bit of water. I've never done that. I don't think that's necessary. And let's see what happens. After about 10 or 20 minutes, the water or the natural juice begins to be drawn out because of both you're breaking down all those cell walls of the plant material, and then the salt, which is naturally dehydrating, begins to draw the juice out of the cabbage.
I can think of a lot of people that like to have these hands massaging their muscles right now.
Yeah, I'd like that to be my shoulders.
Yeah, these are good baker hands.
Yes, they are.
But I'm not going to let you get away without rubbing in the massage because I know you wash your hands. Oh, it's so juicy. I can actually start to feel it already in a few minutes. Giving its massage. And this reminds me of making kale salad by rubbing the salt into the kale. You're breaking down the tissues the same way. So a kale that could be quite tough if it was raw, just eating it by itself with a massage like this actually makes a great salad with oil added to it and lemon juice. And then you've got the beginnings of all that winter kale turned into a salad just by massaging, just like this.
So this is traditional plain sauerkraut, but you can also be adding spices. You can add caraway seeds. That's one of the traditionals. What do you like to add?
Actually, the previous season had Finicchio, which is the bulb fennel, and took off the green fronds and shaved that in. And I know that's a particular flavor. It's almost like licorice, but it actually was visiting friend from Germany that had this idea, and I think they'd had it as a family tradition as well. So we tried it, and it was really delicious. But
Your turn to taste.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
So now what we're doing is we're tasting for salt because our taste buds are great to rely on in terms of how much salt. Not only that do you want for flavor, but if it's a nice saltiness, that's typically the right amount of salt that will start the fermentation,
Yeah.
get it going, but also slow that decay process down. What do you think?
So that was about 3 pounds worth of cabbage and
6 pounds.
oh, 6 pounds, yes.
And then 3 tablespoons.
3, that's where it was.
Yeah.
3.
Is it good or more?
I'd love it like this.
I love it.
Yeah. And actually, we'll bring this view into camera focus pretty soon because the juices are already starting to.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can get any juice. Yeah, look at that. So no water added. That's just the natural process of beginning to culture the cabbage.
Yeah, that's all natural cabbage juices. Essentially because it was harvested just recently, this morning and this afternoon. And the farmer's market that we spoke of earlier with cucumbers is another asset because generally that cabbage would have been harvested the previous evening or that morning. So full of its natural juices, where Seraphina was mentioning adding fluid, is a store-bought cabbage could have traveled thousands of miles, even if it is organic. And some of that evaporation of the plant material itself will be limiting this kind of flow already.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to add here is you can see that this is a nice cabbage. It's tightly formed and really juicy. Some cabbages like Savoy give a beautiful texture, but you want these nice dense cabbage heads. These are the ones that have a lot of nice.
It's actually called Danish ball head.
Ah, perfect. Danish ball head.
Yeah.
There you